Growing up in a small town in Ohio, life often felt both too quiet and too loud at the same time. Too quiet because opportunities felt limited, and too loud because everyone seemed to know everyone else's business. My parents were strict churchgoers, and Sunday mornings were non-negotiable. Rain, snow, or blazing summer heat, my mom would press my only decent dress, my dad would grumble about the sermon being too long, and we'd pile into the car headed for First Baptist on Main Street. To me, church wasn't just about hymns and Bible verses. It was about belonging. It was about the place where families gathered, kids laughed in the basement during Sunday school, and people shared casseroles and gossip after service. And for someone like me, awkward, quiet, unsure of who I was, it was the only place I felt like I wasn't completely invisible. That's where I met him, Caleb. Caleb wasn't a pastor. He wasn't even that much older than me. He was 22 when I was 14, just out of college, back in town working odd jobs and volunteering with the church youth group. But to me, he might as well have been a superhero. He was tall, athletic, had that easy smile that made everyone feel important when he looked at you. The kind of smile that said, "I see you." And for a girl who often felt unseen, even in her own home, that meant everything. My parents always compared me to my older brother, Aaron. Aaron was the golden child. Straight A student, star basketball player, the kind of kid adults pointed to and said, "Now that's how you raise them right." And then there was me, quiet, clumsy, too many questions, never enough confidence. I was the shadow trailing behind his glow. But Caleb didn't treat me like a shadow. He treated me like I mattered. It started with small things. After youth group one night, he noticed I was sitting alone while everyone else crowded around the snack table. "Hey," he said, sliding into the seat next to me. "You draw, right? I saw your notebook last week." I nearly froze. No one had ever noticed my doodles before. I always sketched quietly in the corner, little drawings of people, of towns that looked like ours but somehow more magical. I nodded shyly. "They're really good," he said. "You should show people. You've got a gift." That was the first time I felt proud of something I did, instead of ashamed it wasn't good enough. Over time, Caleb became more than just the youth leader. He was the big brother I never had. Sure, Aaron was my brother by blood, but he was too busy with sports, friends, and being perfect to ever notice me. Caleb noticed. Caleb listened. When my parents and I fought, and we fought a lot during those years, Caleb was the one I turned to. I told him about how my mom always nitpicked my grades, how my dad seemed disappointed when I didn't measure up to Aaron, how I felt like I was drowning in a house where love was conditional on achievement. He'd nod, sometimes quote a Bible verse, sometimes just say, "You're worth more than you think. Don't let them make you feel small." He said things I longed to hear from my parents but never did. Slowly, I began to trust him with everything. When I got my first crush on a boy in class, I told Caleb. When I cried because Aaron called me a loser for not making the volleyball team, I told Caleb. When I stayed up late writing stories about running away and starting over somewhere new, I told Caleb. He was my safe place. My secret keeper. My brother in every way that mattered. And he wasn't just there for me. He was everywhere in our church. Parents trusted him. Kids adored him. Even the pastor leaned on him to help organize events. He had this reputation for being dependable, kind, humble. If you asked anyone in town, they'd probably say Caleb was the kind of young man every parent hoped their son would grow into. But trust is a dangerous thing. Looking back, I realize how easily it can be twisted. How the very things that make someone feel safe can also be the things that trap them. At 14, though, I didn't see that. I couldn't. All I saw was someone who finally understood me in a world that always seemed to misunderstand me. One night after youth group, we sat in the church basement after everyone else had gone home. I was pouring my heart out about how Aaron had just gotten another award at school and how my mom said, "Why can't you be more like him?" I was on the verge of tears when Caleb leaned forward and said, "Don't let them define you. You've got something special, something they don't see yet. Trust me, you're going to prove them wrong one day." I remember clutching those words like they were a lifeline. I wanted so badly to believe him. I didn't know then that the same trust I handed him so freely would one day be the weapon he'd use to shatter me. For now, all I knew was that I had finally found the brother I thought I'd never have. And I believed, naively, desperately, that he'd never betray me. High school is supposed to be this exciting, terrifying chapter where you start figuring out who you are. For me, it felt more like a stage where every spotlight pointed out what I wasn't. By ninth grade, I had already built a reputation at school as Aaron's little sister. Teachers would smile and say, "Oh, you're Aaron's sibling?" He was such a joy to have in class. Then their eyes would fall on me, quiet, awkward, sketchbook tucked under my arm, and I could feel the silent comparison. Like they were wondering how the same parents managed to raise two kids who seemed like opposites. At home, things weren't much better. My parents adored Aaron, showered him with praise, and reminded me, without words most of the time, that I was the backup plan, not the main event. I wanted so badly to scream, "I'm more than just a sister." But I never did. Instead, I swallowed it down and kept filling notebook after notebook with drawings, sketches, and stories I never showed anyone. Except Caleb. He was the one person who seemed genuinely interested in who I was beneath all the comparisons. "Your art is incredible," he'd tell me. "It's how you see the world, and it matters." I trusted him with things I never thought I'd say out loud. Like the night I admitted how lonely I felt sitting at the dinner table while my parents gushed over Aaron's latest game-winning score. "Sometimes," I whispered, "I think they'd be happier if I wasn't around." Caleb didn't flinch. He didn't dismiss it or tell me I was being dramatic like Aaron would have. Instead, he leaned forward, voice low but steady. "Don't ever believe that. You're important. You're enough." I held onto those words like armor. Over the months, my confessions grew heavier. I told him about the time a group of girls at school made fun of me for wearing thrift store clothes. How I sat in the bathroom stall during lunch just to avoid being laughed at. How I sometimes stayed awake at night imagining a life in some other town, where I wasn't just someone's sister or someone's disappointment. And then came the confession that would change everything, my mom's diary. It wasn't intentional. One evening, while cleaning out the attic, I stumbled across a box of old journals. Most were harmless, scribbles about family vacations, recipes, Bible study notes, but one caught my attention. It was dated the year I was born. Curiosity got the better of me. I opened it, and that's when I saw in my mother's tidy handwriting her doubts about having a second child. Words like overwhelmed and not sure I can love another baby like Aaron leapt off the page. My chest tightened as I flipped through, reading entries about sleepless nights, her frustration, and how she sometimes wished she had stopped with just one child. I remember sitting there in the attic, hands shaking, tears blurring the ink. I felt like I had proof now, proof that I was never truly wanted. I told Caleb, I don't know why. Maybe because I needed someone to share the unbearable weight with. Maybe because I hoped he'd tell me it didn't matter, that parents write things in moments of weakness but still love their kids. But he didn't say that. Instead, he leaned back, his face unreadable. "That must have been really hard to read," he said slowly. "But it explains a lot, doesn't it? Why you feel the way you do at home." It was subtle, almost comforting at first, but looking back, I realized that was the moment he started planting seeds. Seeds of doubt. Seeds that would later grow into vines that strangled everything I thought I knew. I kept talking though. I kept confessing. When I got my first real crush on a boy named Tyler in my English class, Caleb was the first to know. I told him how Tyler lent me his pencil one day and how my heart nearly exploded from something so small. Caleb laughed softly, like an older brother teasing but supportive. "Just be careful," he said. "Not every guy will treat you right." I told him about my fights with Aaron, the shouting matches that ended with me slamming my bedroom door and crying into my pillow. I told him about the nights I felt like running away, just to see if anyone would notice. I told him everything. And while he listened, comforted, and offered advice, he was also memorizing every detail. every insecurity, every secret I thought was safe. There was one night I'll never forget. We were sitting in his old pickup truck after youth group, parked under a streetlight in the church lot. I was venting about how invisible I felt at home when Caleb said something that struck me as odd. You know, he said, voice low. Sometimes the people closest to us are the ones holding us back. Sometimes they're not rooting for us the way they should. I frowned, unsure. You mean, my parents? He didn't answer directly, just gave a vague shrug, like he was suggesting something but didn't want to say it outright. All I'm saying is, you deserve people who believe in you. And if they can't see your worth, that's their loss. At the time, it felt validating. Like finally, someone was on my side. But later, I'd realized it was the first time he encouraged me to see my family not as flawed but as enemies. Still, I brushed off the unease. Caleb had never steered me wrong before, so why would he start now? The truth is, when you're young and desperate for someone to believe in you, you don't question their motives. You don't stop to wonder why they want to know all your secrets. You just keep talking, keep handing over pieces of yourself, until one day you realize you've given them enough ammunition to destroy you. And that's exactly what I did. At 15 years old, I thought I had found a safe place in Caleb. I had no idea I was laying the foundation for my own downfall, one secret at a time. By the time I turned 16, Caleb had become woven into the fabric of my life. He wasn't just my youth leader anymore. He was my confidant, my mentor, the voice in my head whenever I doubted myself. If I was upset, I called Caleb. If I was excited, I texted Caleb. If I felt like the world was caving in, I knew Caleb would be there to hold it up for me. At least, that's what I believed. The first cracks appeared so quietly that I almost didn't notice them. It started with little things he'd say in conversations. Your mom's really hard on you, huh? I don't know how you live with that constant criticism. Or, Aaron acts like he's perfect, but you've told me enough to know he's not. At first, it felt validating, like he was confirming that the things I felt were real, not just me being overly sensitive. But slowly, his words began to sharpen. He didn't just listen to my frustrations anymore. He fed them. He encouraged them. One night after youth group, I was venting about how my mom grounded me for missing curfew by 15 minutes. Caleb leaned back in his chair and said, "Sounds like she's trying to control you. Maybe she's just jealous you're becoming your own person." I laughed nervously, brushing it off. Jealous? My mom? That seemed absurd. But the thought lingered in the back of my mind. And then, gradually, I began noticing something else. Things I had told Caleb in confidence were somehow making their way back to my parents. It started with the diary. A week after I confessed to Caleb that I had found and read my mom's old journal, she confronted me in the kitchen. Her face was pale, her voice tight. "Did you go through my things in the attic?" I froze. I hadn't told a soul. Not Aaron, not my friends, just Caleb. I stammered. I was cleaning and her eyes filled with a mix of fury and hurt. "Those were private. How could you?" I wanted to scream that I hadn't told anyone, that she shouldn't even know I had seen them. But I didn't. Instead, I swallowed the guilt and wondered how she had found out. At the time, I convinced myself she must have noticed something misplaced in the box. But deep down, a question gnawed at me. Did Caleb say something? The doubt was small, but it was there. A few weeks later, it happened again. I had confessed to Caleb that I sometimes skipped lunch because I didn't want to sit alone in the cafeteria. It was one of the most vulnerable things I had admitted, and I told him through tears how humiliating it felt. 2 nights later, my dad pulled me aside at home. His tone was unusually soft, but his words still cut deep. "Your mom tells me you've been skipping meals. Is this some kind of cry for attention?" I felt my face burn with shame. My secret wasn't safe anymore. My pain wasn't mine. It had been handed to my parents, filtered through someone else's voice. And I knew exactly who that someone was. Still, I didn't confront Caleb. I couldn't. He was too important to me. The idea of accusing him, of losing the one person I thought was in my corner, terrified me. So I convinced myself there had to be another explanation. Maybe my parents overheard me crying in my room. Maybe Aaron said something. Maybe. Anything but Caleb. Because if Caleb couldn't be trusted, then who could? The breaking point came one Sunday afternoon after service. My mom cornered me in the church hallway, her voice sharp enough to slice through the hum of conversations around us. "I heard about that boy you like," she said. "Tyler, isn't it? Do you think it's appropriate for a girl your age to be thinking about boys instead of focusing on school?" My stomach dropped. That was the one secret I had guarded most carefully. I hadn't told my parents, hadn't told Aaron, hadn't told anyone except Caleb. The look on my mom's face was part anger, part disappointment. She wasn't just scolding me, she was judging me. I wanted to melt into the floor. When I finally got Caleb alone later that week, I tried to bring it up carefully. "It's weird. My mom knew about Tyler. I never told her." "You don't think someone else overheard us, do you?" Caleb didn't miss a beat. He leaned back, gave me that calm, reassuring smile, and said, "Small towns have big ears. Word travels fast." Something in his tone made me want to believe him. So I did. I convinced myself it was just bad luck, just gossip. I buried the suspicion deeper. But my trust wasn't as unshakable as it once was. Over the next year, I noticed more shifts. Caleb became less of the big brother who listened and more of the voice who interpreted my world for me. When I complained about Aaron, he'd say, "He's always going to try to keep you in his shadow. Don't let him win." When I fought with my mom, he'd say, "She's projecting her own failures onto you. Don't let it get inside your head." He was turning my family into villains, slowly, subtly. And I didn't realize how much it was working until I found myself looking at my own parents through a lens of suspicion. I started believing my mom didn't just criticize me, she wanted me to fail. I started believing Aaron didn't just tease me, he resented me. I started believing my dad wasn't just distant, he didn't care. And all the while, Caleb was right there, reinforcing every doubt, every fear, every insecurity. He was the one person I thought I could trust, while he was also the one person pulling me further away from everyone else. By junior year, I barely talked to my parents anymore unless it was an argument. Aaron and I were strangers living under the same roof. And Caleb? He was the center of my world, the only one I thought understood me. But what I didn't see was that he was also the one making sure no one else ever would. By the time I was 17, my world revolved around Caleb without me even realizing it. My parents thought I was rebellious. Aaron thought I was moody. But the truth was simpler. Caleb was the only one I trusted. Everyone else felt like an enemy. But the thing about lies and manipulation is that they can only stay hidden for so long. Eventually, the cracks turn into breaks, and the breaks reveal everything. It happened slowly at first. One Wednesday evening after youth group, I overheard two church moms talking in the hallway. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. I was just grabbing a water from the cooler when I caught my own name. "Such a shame," one of them whispered. "She's always so troubled. Caleb says she's struggling with depression. I hope her parents are keeping a close eye on her." I froze. Depression? Yes, I had confided in Caleb about the nights I cried myself to sleep, about how hopeless I sometimes felt. But I had never used the word depression. Not with my parents. Not with anyone. And now, these women, gossipy, judgmental, church women, were whispering about me like I was some broken thing. My face burned as I ducked out of sight. The only way they could know was Caleb. He had taken my pain, my private struggle, and packaged it into something to discuss over coffee after Bible study. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, my chest heavy with betrayal. Why would he tell them? I asked myself over and over. Why would he share that? But still, when I saw him on Sunday, he smiled at me the way he always did, and my anger dissolved into confusion. He had been there for me when no one else was. Surely he wouldn't hurt me on purpose. And so I silenced the voice in my head that screamed otherwise. But the truth wasn't done unraveling. A few weeks later, I was called into the guidance counselor's office at school. I sat down, nervous, wondering if I was in trouble for something. Mrs. Howard gave me a sympathetic look and said, "Sweetheart, I heard you've been having a really hard time at home. That you don't feel supported. Is that true?" I blinked, stunned. "Who told you that?" She shifted uncomfortably. "Well, Caleb reached out. He said he was worried about you." My heart dropped. He had gone to my school, my safe space, my escape from the constant family drama. He had dragged it into the mess. Suddenly, I felt exposed, like every secret I had whispered in confidence had been broadcasted to the people who were supposed to evaluate me, grade me, decide my future. That night, I confronted him for the first time. We sat in his truck again, the same place where I had shared so many secrets. My hands shook as I asked, "Why did you tell the school counselor about me? That wasn't your place." Caleb didn't look guilty. He didn't even hesitate. He just said, "Because I care about you. Because someone has to make sure you're safe if your own family won't." I wanted to argue, to tell him he crossed a line, but the way he said it made me feel like maybe he was right. Maybe he really was the only one looking out for me. But deep down, the unease grew louder. Then came the breaking point. It was at a youth group bonfire, one of those nights where everyone laughed too loud and the stars seemed close enough to touch. I was sitting with a few girls from school when one of them smirked and said, "So, is it true you're in love with Tyler but too scared to talk to him?" My stomach lurched. "What? Who told you that?" She grinned. "Caleb mentioned it. Said it was cute how nervous you get." The world tilted. My face flushed hot as the other girls giggled. My most private, vulnerable confession had been reduced to a joke for everyone else's amusement. In that moment, something shattered. I left the bonfire early, stormed home, and locked myself in my room. I cried until my pillow was soaked, not just from humiliation, but from realization. This wasn't protection. This wasn't care. This was betrayal. Every secret I had ever shared with Caleb, my fears, my pain, my crushes, even my family's flaws, wasn't safe. He had been using them, sharing them, twisting them to build his own reputation as the caring youth leader, while painting me as the troubled girl who needed saving. And the worst part? People believed him. My parents looked at me differently, like I was fragile glass. Teachers gave me pitying smiles. Church members whispered about me when they thought I wasn't listening. My reputation wasn't just bruised, it was destroyed. I wasn't the quiet, artsy girl anymore. I was the unstable one, the dramatic one, the problem. And Caleb had made it happen. When I finally gathered the courage to confront him again, it didn't go the way I hoped. "Why are you doing this?" I demanded, my voice trembling. "Why are you telling people my secrets? You're supposed to be someone I can trust." He looked at me with calm, almost pitying eyes. "I am someone you can trust. But people need to understand what you're going through. They need to know the truth so they can help." "No," I snapped, tears filling my eyes. "You're making me look weak. You're making me look broken." His smile faded, his voice tightening. "Maybe you need to accept that you are broken. And maybe I'm the only one willing to admit it." That was the moment I realized. He wasn't my big brother. He wasn't my protector. He wasn't even my friend. He was the person tearing me apart, piece by piece, under the disguise of helping me. And the scariest part? No one would believe me if I said so. Because to the town, to the church, to my family, Caleb was a hero. And I was just a messed up girl in need of saving. By the time senior year rolled around, I felt like I was living in a cage Caleb had built for me. Every whisper in the hallway, every pointed look at church, every sigh from my parents, it all traced back to secrets I had once thought were safe. I was suffocating in a story that wasn't mine anymore. At school, I was the girl who struggled with depression. At church, I was the girl Caleb was trying to help. At home, I was the daughter who couldn't be trusted with her own emotions. None of those labels came from me. They all came from him. And yet, whenever I tried to pull away, he reeled me back in. "Don't push me out," he'd say. "I'm the only one who understands you. You don't want to be alone, do you?" It was manipulation dressed up as concern, and for months I let myself believe it, because the alternative was admitting I had been wrong about him all along. But the truth has a way of forcing itself out, even when you try to bury it. It happened on a rainy Sunday morning. I was late for church, rushing through the hallways when I heard my parents' voices drifting from an open classroom door. They weren't alone. Caleb was with them. I stopped, hidden by the wall, my heart pounding. "She's unstable," Caleb was saying. "You can't trust what she tells you. She needs stricter boundaries, structure. If you don't put your foot down, she'll spiral." My breath caught. My mom's voice trembled. "We just want what's best for her." "And so do I," Caleb replied smoothly. "But you need to stop letting her manipulate you. She's not a child anymore. She's complicated, complicated, broken, manipulative." He was dismantling me piece by piece in front of the very people whose approval I craved most. And in that moment, something inside me snapped. For years, I had believed his voice over my own. I had let him redefine my story. But standing there, hearing him twist my parents' perception of me, I finally saw the truth. Caleb wasn't protecting me. He was controlling me. He was using me to build his own image as the savior, the hero, the one who could fix the broken girl. And I was done being broken. That night, I made a choice. I wasn't going to stay silent anymore. I started by telling Aaron. It wasn't easy. He and I hadn't been close in years. But when I sat on the edge of his bed and poured out everything Caleb had done, his face hardened in a way I'd never seen before. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" he asked. "Because I thought no one would believe me." "Well, I do," he said firmly. "And I'll help you." For the first time in years, my brother wasn't my rival. He was my ally. Together, we went to our parents. I showed them the texts Caleb had sent me, the ones where he painted my family as enemies. I repeated the things he had said, the secrets he had shared without my permission. I told them about the gossip, the counselor, the bonfire humiliation. At first, they resisted. Caleb had been their golden boy too, the church's favorite. But slowly, as the evidence piled up, I saw the cracks form in their certainty. I saw the realization dawn that maybe, just maybe, the daughter they thought was broken had been telling the truth all along. The confrontation that followed was brutal. My parents called Caleb into our living room one evening, Aaron and I sitting on the couch like soldiers bracing for battle. "Did you tell the school counselor she was depressed?" my dad demanded. "Of course," Caleb said smoothly, his eyes flicking to me. "Because she is." Someone had to step in. "Did you tell the girls at church about her crush?" my mom pressed. Caleb smirked. They were going to find out anyway. Every excuse was calm, polished, manipulative. But this time, I didn't stay quiet. "You don't get to tell my story anymore," I said, my voice shaking but loud. "You don't get to use me to make yourself look like a hero. You're not my brother. You're not my savior. You're a liar." For the first time, I saw something flicker in his eyes, anger. Not pity, not fake concern, but real anger that his control was slipping. "You'll regret this," he muttered. "No," I said, standing tall. "The only thing I regret is ever trusting you." After that night, Caleb's hold on our family unraveled quickly. My parents went to the pastor who, reluctantly at first, began hearing similar stories from other kids. Slowly, the image of Caleb as the perfect youth leader began to crumble. Parents grew cautious. Whispers turned against him. And eventually, the church asked him to step down. But the damage he had done to me wasn't undone overnight. For months, I walked through the halls of school and church with the weight of my ruined reputation. People still whispered. Some still pitied me. Others doubted me. And there were nights I lay awake, wondering if I'd ever feel normal again. But I wasn't alone anymore. Aaron checked in on me. My parents, clumsy, imperfect, but trying, started asking how I felt instead of assuming. And little by little, I started reclaiming my story. I poured my pain into art, filling sketchbooks with images of cages breaking, masks shattering, and hands reaching for light. I joined an art club at school, found friends who saw me as more than Caleb's narrative, and slowly, I began to heal. The scars are still there. Even now, years later, I sometimes flinch when someone says, "You can trust me." But I also know I'm stronger than I ever thought I was. Because I learned the hardest, most painful lesson. Not everyone who smiles at you has good intentions. Not everyone who seems like family is safe. But I also learned that being broken isn't the same as being weak. And that no one, not Caleb, not my parents, not my town, gets to decide who I am except me. I lost my voice for a while, but I got it back. And this time, no one will take it from me again.